Hello everybody, so a while ago Owen Jones did an interview with a woman called Nimco Ali, and the big question was whether or not Boris Johnson's use of the word bumboy was homophobic and unacceptable. Bumboy. And you can probably tell from the kind of smile I have on my face right now that I found this discussion very humorous. Because, first of all, I mean, bumboy is already a very funny term. Bumboy. You know, like already, just right off the bat, bumboy is just a really funny way to describe a gay person. And then, on top of that, you have the fact that Owen Jones is from the north of England. And in the north, they pronounce their sound, So, it's not bumboy, it's bumboy. Bumboy. Which makes it funnier, because accents are funny. So, you know, because bumboy, well, it's kind of, you know, it's boring, because I'm just pronouncing it the way it should be pronounced. But up north, they say, bumboy, stop calling me a bumboy. Which is funny. And then on top of all of that, as if this wasn't enough reason for it to be funny, you also have the fact that this is a really serious debate. Like, Owen Jones is really... he's really going for it. He's like, hey, people have been calling me bumboy. People have been on my Twitter are calling me bumboy. And he's like really distressed about it. So it's kind of like, it's another level of hilarity that they're having this really serious debate about the use of the term bumboy to describe gay gentlemen. And it's just really funny. But what I want to talk about in this video is how I think there's a fourth level. I mean, if you could imagine, you know, it's already so funny that you've got the word bumboy, which is just funny anyway. You've got this hilarious northern accent, and then you've got the fact it's a really serious debate about it. But I would argue there is a fourth reason why this is funny, and it has to do with Owen Jones's central question, which is the use of this term homophobic?
Is it homophobic?
You know, is it homophobic to refer to a gay person as a bumboy? And my argument, or my suggestion, would be that let's say yes. You know, I think actually it's a genuine argument that could be had. Like, is this word really so kind of offensive that it should be considered homophobic? Well, maybe. I mean, certainly it's probably a term that's used in kind of a maybe a mocking way. Like if you see like a very obviously gay person and you kind of want to be like, look how bloody gay that guy is. You're like, look at that bumboy. You know, like it's, I would say that's usually the use of the term. It's basically just a way to say, like, I'll tell you what, I mean, this guy, he is gay. Let's be clear about this. This guy, he's a real bumboy. So, I mean, is that homophobic? Well, I mean, you could say there's kind of like a negative connotation there. But let's just say it is homophobic. Well, my argument is going to be that you can basically be homophobic while not being homophobic. In the sense you can perform an action that is homophobic while not actually yourself being a homophobic person. And this is basically just because of humor. Like, you can actually say, you know, and this applies to other things, you can say, yes, what this person did was homophobic, yes, what this person did was racist, yes, what this person did was sexist, but they did it for comedy. Now, this might not seem like a particularly unique take. It's just saying, well, sometimes being offensive can be funny. But I think there's a specific reason for this, which I would like to unpack, which is that a great source of humor is irreverence. So oftentimes if you want to kind of make fun of the powers that be, whether they be political, religious, cultural, it's always kind of a very legitimate line of attack to say, I'm going to attack the powers that be. And the reason this is funny is because it's being subversive and it's being irreverent. You can almost say all humor is kind of based in a kind of contradiction. Like almost all humor is kind of about a contradiction, I think you could say. Like there's a central contradiction to all jokes. And in this case, it's kind of the contradiction between the idea that we're told that we should respect these authorities, and yet we are mocking them, we're making fun of them, we're showing that we actually don't really care about the idea that we should respect these things. It's why saying something just flagrantly offensive about the Queen or the Pope is just funny, even though it wouldn't be particularly funny if you said it about some random person. Like, I don't know, if you said that some random kind of homeless person is really scummy in some way, then that's whatever, no one cares. But if you said that about the Pope, that's funny. I mean, actually, one of my favorite jokes is the Pope is going to a kind of a town, a very Catholic town, and there's this guy there. He's a pretty well-to-do guy, so he puts on his best outfit, his nicest outfit, to go and meet the Pope. And they all line up, and the Pope's kind of walking down the street, kind of like shaking hands with people, talking to people, and he just walks right past this, well-to-do Catholic, and he goes up to a homeless man, in rags, all dirty, and he kind of whispers in his ear, and he, holds him close, whispers in his ear, and then goes off on his way. And the man reasons. He thinks, oh well, of course, the Pope. He's a very kind of he's a very humble person. He's somebody who's very Christ-like in his actions. It's pretty obvious that actually he's not taken an interest in me because I'm clearly very well off, and he has instead turned to this poor person who is one of the destitute, one of the meek of the world. So he decides to swap outfits with the homeless person. He says, hey, you can have my really nice suit. It's really fancy, proper designer, all that, and I'll wear your rags. And that'll be the deal. So does it. Puts on his rags, old soiled shoes, whatever, runs down the line to kind of get ahead of where the Pope is. Runs, past everyone, ahead of the Pope. Pope comes by, sees him, pulls him in close, puts his lips to his ear and says, I thought I told you to fuck off. And the joke there is that the Pope, I mean, it's literally like, it's pretty obvious what the joke is. We're told, oh, the Pope is actually somebody who's very kind of, humble and would obviously want to take care of the poor people and all that kind of stuff. So the irreverence and the subversion comes from the idea, actually, what if the Pope was just a total dickhead? And obviously that joke doesn't work if it isn't the Pope. And of course, yeah, it also applies to kind of royal families and things like that. But the thing is, nowadays, who is kind of powerful, who should be respected, has kind of changed a bit recently. And what's increasingly happened is that with kind of the rise of identity politics and woke culture, as it's often called, has come this idea that certain kind of broad identities should be respected just kind of because. That there's certain people who you have to be very careful about not making jokes about them, not offending them, not saying anything to upset, not saying anything that could be misconstrued as offensive towards these people. And there's kind of, this growing idea of like, oh, you can't say that, it's a horrible thing to say. So basically, I mean, nowadays, and, to an extent, I mean, it's a legitimate concern, obviously. But what you kind of get with that is these kind of self-appointed kind of language police who are very kind of self-assured, very kind of arrogant, very castigatory, and they'll say, oh no, you're using the wrong language. You can't call them gypsies anymore. It's people of Romani extraction. It's travelling persons, whatever else. And, or whatever other example you want to use. You can't call them bumboys. It's people attracted to man-identifying individuals or whatever. Those are the rules now. And the point being, when you have these people who are very kind of, sure of themselves, very kind of lofty in their own regard, obviously the potential comes for the humour of irreverence. The humour of saying, I don't care what these people think. When somebody tells you oh, no, you can't, that's actually really offensive because of cultural appropriation and all that kind of stuff. So it's not funny to go, whoa, 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 because the Native Americans, they didn't even do that. So that's actually really, and it harkens back to some serious kind of issues of how Native Americans were presented in the old Western films. it's really difficult not to just want to go, like, wah, 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 because you know that it's just annoying these people who are completely ridiculous in terms of like how much they think this stuff matters. So basically, I mean, that's the point. It's about irreverence. It's about not kowtowing to these people's nonsense. And to bring it back to the old bumboy thing, the reason why you would say kind of bumboy is because you know that Owen Jones is going to be proper like serious about it and be like, actually that's really offensive towards gay people because we don't like being called bumboys. And that's hilarious because of who Owen Jones is, because of what Owen Jones represents. And by the way, not because he's gay or because he represents gay people, which by the way, he does not represent gay people, but because of the kind of culture he represents, because of the political class he represents. The people who are obsessed with policing everybody's language and all that kind of stuff. And it's funny to make fun of that. So basically, as kind of like this obsession with being politically correct basically becomes more and more extreme. And I mean, it's kind of funny because like obviously political correctness has been around for ages, but with kind of like the rise of Twitter mostly, it's become like way more like I'm not crazy in saying that it's become more extreme kind of as time has gone on. But yeah, like as that becomes more of a relevant force, it's going to be a much more legitimate avenue of humor just to be racist or homophobic or sexist as a way of saying, I don't care about these people who have appointed themselves authorities on, what's acceptable and all that kind of stuff. The exact same way that, like back when people kind of took sort of religious belief was considered much more kind of like revered in society. It was a legitimate form of humor to basically be like, I don't care about these kind of religious edicts and all that kind of stuff. Whereas nowadays, like especially seeing as in like a lot of kind of the Anglosphere, religion just isn't much of a relevant force anymore. It's kind of like people like Ricky Gervais who like make fun of kind of Noah's Ark or something. It's kind of considered just like a much lamer form of comedy. And I think that was like one of the issues of kind of new atheism and why a lot of people are just like, what the hell are you doing? Because it's like, I mean, sure, in America it's a thing, but in the UK, like religion just isn't really that relevant to our society. So it's kind of like making your hilarious like takedowns of Christianity. I mean, I guess it's fine, but whatever. And of course, I mean, this is where the kind of left-wing thing comes in, or kind of like the political divide thing comes in. What is funny now is making fun of Islam, because you can't because of like how sensitive everyone is around Islam. Basically, I mean, a classic example, like anything surrounding like drawing Muhammad. It's not funny for any reason other than the fact, like, there's nothing should intrinsically be funny about drawing Muhammad, but it's funny because of these people who are really serious about it, and, they think it needs to be respected. Like, they are telling you, this thing needs to be respected. It's just like, kind of, in the olden days when the political and religious authorities would tell you what needs to be respected. And you say, no, screw that. And nowadays it's the people saying, you got to respect Islam. You can't make fun of Muhammad, all that kind of stuff. It just means, well, let's kind of double down on that. Now, I could come up with several examples of where I've done this, and you could almost take this as kind of a preemptive, I guess, explanation. Certainly not an apology, but explanation for any instance where I may have said something that could be offensive to a particular group of people. It's something I do all the time, but a really good example was like after the whole coronavirus thing, when like the entire world decided we needed to stop being racist to the virus, and like we needed to stop calling it like the Wuhan flu or the Chinese virus, or like in any way kind of making reference to the fact that the virus comes from China, because that's offensive towards Chinese people. And I just thought, like, this is so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous that we're being asked to like identity matters so much now that you can't even make fun of a virus that comes from kind of a non-white majority country. And And because of that, I think for a very long period of time, I don't do it so much anymore, but for a pretty extended period of time, I exclusively referred to it as the Kung Flu, because I knew that was like considered the most offensive one. Like, oh, you can't call it the Kung Flu. No, you'll hurt the virus's feelings. And I just thought that's so stupid that it's really funny to me to call it the Kung Flu. And yeah, I actually, I have a kind of, I guess, friend. I mean, I don't really anymore, as we'll get into, but kind of like somebody who's very much part of that kind of like, oh, you need to be careful about what you say. You can't be offensive in any kind of way. You can never ever upset anyone or hurt anybody's feelings. And they literally basically stopped talking to me because I made a joke about the coronavirus. I mean, I called it the Kung Flu. And they said, oh, that's so racist. Like they said, yeah, being racist isn't funny. I was like, it is though. It is funny because of how ridiculous you're being and how ridiculous the whole world is being about like the word Kung Flu, or I guess it's 2 words. Like, you will never ever convince me that it was horrible and mean and evil of me to call the coronavirus the Kung Flu. I did it for a very long time because I knew that it was like, because it was like the main thing I picked up on was the thing you weren't supposed to be saying. So I was like, okay, I'm definitely rolling with this. And that's it basically. Like it's when you see something that's so ridiculous in terms of how much respect it demands from you, how much reverence you're supposed to kind of give to this thing of like what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do, all of these kind of edicts about behavior and stuff. I'd say it's often quite funny to just do the opposite. But there is something I want to talk about, which is people who kind of act as if they're like edgy and offensive, but then they get offended when people point out that they're being edgy and offensive. In a really bizarre way. And I think it speaks to the fact that these people aren't really doing it because of like, you know, for the reasons that I've kind of previously mentioned. And a good example is, so Norm Macdonald died recently, which obviously, you know, rest in peace there and all that. But I do think that was like a kind of undue hype surrounding Norm Macdonald. You know, he was fine. Anyway, he had this one joke where basically the joke was that Andy Richter, obviously the co-host on Conan O'Brien, was a gay prostitute, but then you actually go on to find out that he's not really a gay prostitute. He's more just being forcefully pimped, and people are having sex with him against his will. That's the joke. Now, obviously, you know, like the joke is presented in a way, you know, where it functions more as a joke, but essentially that's the joke. Now, the thing is, like, a lot of people have been saying, so Andy Richter basically came out and said, you know, in some sense, it kind of seems like the joke is that being gay is just funny. You know, as if like the joke is, it's a story about gay prostitution. And like that's what a lot of the joke relies on. And perhaps that would be offensive to somebody who is gay. You know, somebody who's gay might hear that and be like, hold a minute, so you know, what is it about being gay that's apparently so funny that just like the idea of, you know, man on man sex is funny. And, you know, basically that was his kind of criticism. And I think it was kind of said, you know, within the context of him overall saying like, oh, Norm Macdonald was a guy who pushed boundaries and all that kind of stuff in like a positive sense. But he was just saying, you know, when you actually look at what is the joke there, maybe it's a bit kind of inappropriate. Now, the thing is, there were people saying like, oh, well, actually, the joke is that it's just such an outrageous and offensive thing to say. Which would be kind of running along the lines of what I said. Now, I would actually argue that I don't think that is the joke. But I'm not going to get into what I think the actual joke is. But I think the joke's just a kind of a twist kind of thing, a subversion, where the whole way into the joke, basically the implication is that Andy Richter is a male prostitute, and then the twist at the end, which kind of, you know, catches you off guard, it's unexpected, it plays with your expectations, is it's revealed that actually Andy Richter isn't a male prostitute at all. He's somebody who is made to do this completely against his own will, which you just wouldn't expect. And that's, I think, the joke. But, a lot of people saying, well, the point of the joke is how offensive it is. And that's fine if you want to argue that. But then the problem is you had like a lot of people at the same time getting offended at Andy Richter for pointing out how the joke was offensive. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. You can't argue that a joke is funny because it's offensive and then get angry at people for pointing out that the joke is offensive. It just doesn't work. And I think the problem is like certain people, they just aren't really able to handle like actually doing this type of comedy of like being offensive for offensive sake, because then they get angry when people get offended. And so what the hell are you doing? Like, how is it a joke then? If you get angry at people being offended, why are you making jokes to offend people? Like, because my take is like, I said the Kung Flu thing because I thought it was funny because I knew it was offensive. And then when people got offended by it, even to the point of no longer talking to me because they were so offended by that, I still to this day find it really funny. There's not like a single part, I'm not like, oh, I'm so angry at that person for finding me offensive. No, of course they found me offensive. I did this thing knowing precisely the kind of people it would annoy, precisely why it would annoy them, and that was the whole point of the joke. So when those people I knew were going to get offended got offended, it doesn't really make sense to get angry that those people got offended. And it's kind of like, the issue is, obviously you could kind of pick up, it means that like those people, like if you're going to get super offended over things, how can you make a joke about other people getting super offended over things? If you're going to get super offended over people having a problem with your sense of humor, having a problem with, like certain forms of comedy and things like that, then how on earth are you going to turn around and make fun of other people for getting offended by stuff? You get offended by stuff just as much. And like, it's a thing that I see all the time from, I hate to say it, but I kind of suspect right-wing people who are right of centre, who kind of like Norm Macdonald, like Bill Burr, like Dave Chappelle, these comedians who, even Louis C.K., comedians who kind of have always been offensive. I mean, Ricky Gervais is another example, being offensive in their own ways. But then, like, these comedians who are offensive actually seem to understand a lot of the time that being offensive is the joke, and therefore it doesn't make sense for them to be offended by other people and like what other people are doing. And yet it seems like a lot of their kind of fans who appear to be kind of on the right end of the spectrum, kind of politically, don't get that, and they get offended by things. I remember one time Bill Burr made a remark about how his wife didn't want to watch Game of Thrones because it was about white people. And, to me, it makes complete sense that Bill Burr, like, I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. Like, Bill Burr is the kind of person who says, like, offensive stuff for the fun of saying offensive stuff a lot of the time. Obviously sometimes he's making a point, but a lot of times it's just to be offensive. So it makes sense to me that saying, like, I don't like Game of Thrones, it's got white people in it, is in its own way an offensive thing to say. So, of course, it makes sense to me that he would go, yeah, like, he'd find that funny. I mean, I find that funny. But you had, like, a lot of Bill Burr fans who were like, why would Bill Burr date somebody or, be married to somebody who hates white people? And they're, like, really angry over it. And it's like, yeah, so at this point, you can't even pretend it's like that you find being offensive funny. It's just that you find it funny to make fun of people who disagree with you. Because as soon as somebody turns around and says, like, yeah, screw white people, suddenly you're all offended. And it's just lame. Like, that's kind of thing. Like, a lot of people, I guess what I'm saying is that I kind of enjoy offensive comedy. But what I'm aware of is that a lot of people who claim to enjoy offensive comedy are actually just conservative people, right-wing people, libertarians, whatever you want to kind of categorize them as, who pretend to be okay with offensive comedy, but as soon as the offensive comedy targets one of their sacred cows, suddenly like, oh no, you can't do that. That's why would you do that? Why would you ruin everything? You totally ruined all of the comedy. And I mean, it happens all the time, like, but, and also a lot of the time I'll say like they sold out or something. Like as soon as Bill Burr, who's criticized lots of people, as soon as he criticizes Republicans or even like Dave Chappelle is clearly like left of center. based on kind of his attitude towards things like Black Lives Matter. You know, and I don't know if he necessarily supports the movement Black Lives Matter, but clearly is pro kind of ending police violence against black people and stuff like that. It's very clear that he's certainly not a conservative. And with that said, the thing is, whenever he comes out and like expresses kind of views that are sort of left wing, I think, for example, he criticized Donald Trump in one of his stand-up specials, and there were so many comments like, "They've sold out. I can't believe he's sold out." And it's like, no, he didn't sell out. You know, you just thought you agreed with him because you apparently can't tell the difference between somebody being offensive because it's funny to be offensive versus somebody actually sincerely holding to right-wing political views. And certainly, yeah, my take is I'll make fun of Owen Jones and his lot for how like obsessed they are about making sure you say the right thing and never ever like say anything that could possibly upset anyone or, you know, offend anyone. I'll make fun of that, but then I'll just as happily turn around and make fun of all the innumerable examples of kind of nonsense you can make fun of on the right of the spectrum as well. You know, whether it's like the people who kind of, I mean, actually, to be fair, I mean, nowadays in the UK, like my attitude towards kind of Judaism is kind of a similar thing, where basically like there was a whole thing where like now it's been decided that left-wing people are all anti-Semites. And you best believe I've played into that quite a lot in my private life. You know, like I just literally anytime somebody mentions Jeremy Corbyn, because apparently Jeremy Corbyn was an anti-Semite, I'll be like, yeah, I love Jeremy Corbyn, especially the way he wanted to put the Jews in their place or whatever, you know, like things like that. Basically just completely running with the idea that that Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite, but in like a way where it's like I'm on board with it. Because I know that will offend people. And who will it offend? It will offend like your Daily Mail readers, your conservative voters, the people who think like Jeremy Corbyn was going to have all the Jews in concentration camps. You know, because it's funny. You know, like, and I mean, like, for example, recently I've been talking about how like, I've been like, Extinction Rebellion should just start planting car bombs under random people's cars because like, that way nobody would drive. I'm like, you know, like they're you know, blocking the M25, jumping around on trains and stuff. Let me tell you, if they just like tomorrow morning, just people start up their cars, explosion, and it's just like completely random people targeted. It's like you don't know who you are, just randomly targeting people's cars. No one would want to drive. They'd be like, please, can we get some kind of public transport? You know, everyone would be like, I'm going to cycle to work now. If Extinction Rebellion did it. And, you know, I would say, some might disagree, but I would say that advocating for eco-terrorism is a pretty kind of offensive, irreverent thing to do. You know, to just say, yeah, you know what they should do? They should just start randomly targeting civilians with indiscriminate bombing campaigns. I would say that goes against a lot of the kind of what's considered acceptable in society. And obviously, again, like, that's aligning myself with kind of, you know, Extinction Rebellion, obviously a left-wing group, and I'm basically positioning myself alongside them because I think it's funny to position myself alongside them, so on and so forth. That's it. Oh, I've got a new door, by the way. I mean, I say a new door. I have a door now. Anyway, so that's the end of the video. Basically, being offensive is funny. Getting offended at people being offended is really stupid. And pretending that you care about like that you appreciate the value of being offensive when actually it's just that you want to make fun of the people you disagree with, and like as soon as it's like targeted at your side, you suddenly become the biggest kind of like, you know, 10 times more of a kind of fanatic in terms of like policing what people say than the biggest SJW left-wing person. You're like, no, don't say anything about Donald Trump, that offends me. Oh, he's great, you're just a shill. It's like, you know, just grow a pair. Yeah, so that's the end of the video. And I don't really know what kind of sign-off I'm going to have on this channel, but it's not really intended to be like that major of a channel, so enjoy the video. And, you know, I'm going to aim to upload videos every Thursday, so bye.
Tank top bum boys calling me a bum boy. Call gay people bum boys. A gay person bum boy. A gay person a bum boy. And bum boy homophobic.